You are a disappointment. Ethan, a complete parasite living on my son's hard work, Martha said, her voice dripping with pure disdain as she paced across the imported Italian marble floor of my living room. I sat quietly on the cream leather sofa, keeping my face completely blank while a cold fire burned deep inside my chest. "Mother, please, let's not start this right now," David muttered, keeping his eyes glued to his polished shoes. He stood right beside her, too cowardly to look at me. "Quiet, David. You are too soft-hearted," Martha snapped, spinning around to point a manicured finger directly at my face. "I am looking out for your future. This gold digger brought nothing into this marriage, and he needs to sign these papers today." She slammed a thick folder onto the glass coffee table. The sharp thud echoed through the high-ceilinged room. "Listen to me, Ethan," Martha sneered, leaning in close so I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with raw malice. "You come from nothing. A penniless nobody from the wrong side of town. My son is an executive at a top firm. You are nothing more than a leech sucking dry as potential." I looked up at her, my hands resting calmly on my knees. "Is that really what you think, Martha?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Do not use that tone with me." She shrieked, her face flushing crimson. "Sign the postnuptial agreement. Hand over your financial independence, and maybe, just maybe, we will let you stay in the guest room of this house." David finally lifted his head, his expression filled with anxious pleading. "Ethan, just sign it, please," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Make it easier for everyone. You know how my mother gets when she does not get her way." "Easier for whom, David?" I asked softly, locking eyes with my husband. "For you?" "Stop glaring at my son," Martha barked, stepping between us like a protective vulture. "You should be kissing the floor." He walks on. "He married beneath his station, out of pity. Now, pick up the pen and sign away any claim to our family wealth." A bitter smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Family wealth. That was a rich joke. "What are you smiling at, you ungrateful wretch?" Martha demanded, crossing her arms tightly over her designer jacket. "Do you think this is a game? Without David's salary, you would be sleeping on a park bench. You really believe that, do you?" I asked, leaning back against the cushions. "Everyone with eyes knows it," Martha scoffed, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. "David pays the mortgage. David pays the bills. David feeds you." "Actually, Martha," I said, my voice steady and cold, "none of that is true." David winced, a sudden look of blind panic flashing across his face. He knew the truth, even if his mother lived in a fantasy world built on snobbery and lies. "What is that supposed to mean?" Martha asked, narrowing her eyes. "It means you are talking a lot of nonsense about a house you do not own," I replied smoothly. "How dare you?" Martha shrieked, slamming her hand onto the coffee table. "This house is part of David's estate. My son worked for this." "Did he?" I raised an eyebrow, letting the silence stretch for an agonizing second. David grabbed his mother's arm, his voice frantic. "Mother, stop. Let's just go. Please. We are not going anywhere until this parasite signs the papers." Martha yanked her arm away from David, glaring at me with unfiltered hatred. "Sign the document right now, Ethan, or I will make sure my son divorces you before the week is over." "Go ahead," I said, standing up slowly from the couch to tower over her. "Let him try." Martha blinked, taken aback by my sudden lack of fear. "You think you are brave because you hide behind my son? You are nothing without us." "You have no idea who I am, Martha," I whispered, walking past her toward the front door and holding it wide open. "And you have no idea who actually owns this roof over your head." The heavy oak door slammed shut with a deafening crash as Martha stormed out into the night, leaving a suffocating silence behind in the living room. I turned my gaze slowly toward my husband, expecting at least a trace of remorse, a quiet apology, or some validation for the stinging humiliation I had just endured. David avoided my eyes, running a hand through his hair and sighing heavily. "You really should not have provoked her, Ethan," he muttered, his voice dripping with defensive annoyance. "Provoked her?" I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as the shock began to settle into my bones. "She walked into our home and called me a parasite, David. She is just worried about my future, and she cares deeply about family security. David argued, crossed his arms, and refusing to look me in the eye. Why do you always have to make things so difficult? Just sign the papers she brought. It will keep the peace. Keep the peace? I repeated, a hollow laugh escaping my lips. By handing over my independence to your mother? It is just a formality, Ethan. David snapped, finally meeting my gaze with a flash of anger. Why are you acting like this is some massive betrayal? Just sign them and make everyone happy. The betrayal cut far deeper than any of Martha's insults ever could because it came directly from the man I had pledged my life to. Is that all I am to you, David? An inconvenience in the way of your mother's approval? I asked, my chest tightening with a sharp, suffocating pain. Do not be dramatic, David said, turning his back on me and walking toward the stairs. I am going to bed. Think about what I said. I stood alone in the vast, quiet living room for a long time after he left, listening to the faint ticking of the wall clock. The warmth of our vows felt like a distant, foolish dream built entirely on shifting sand. Later that night, I lay awake in the dark, staring blankly at the ceiling while the digital glow of my phone illuminated the bedroom. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand, and I saw a late-night message pop up from Richard, my oldest friend and tech business partner. You okay, man? Richard asked in the text. I know how toxic David family is getting. Do not let them walk all over you. You built everything you have from the ground up. I picked up the phone and typed back a brief reply. I am fine, Richard. Just thinking about how blind I was. Do not let them take what belongs to you. Richard warned immediately. You work too hard for your success. Remember who holds the real power. His words struck a chord, pulling me out of my paralyzing grief and stoking a cold, hard resolve in my chest. Quietly, so as not to wake David, I slid out of bed and walked over to my desk, opening my laptop. I bypassed the domestic arguments and opened the encrypted folder containing my personal legal records. My eyes scanned the digital documents, resting firmly on the official property deed, mortgage clearances, and sole bank account registries. Property owner, Ethan Vance. Sole proprietor. I stared at the glowing text for a long, quiet moment, feeling the heavy ache in my chest slowly morph into something much sharper and colder. Let them play their games, I whispered to the empty room. Let them think they hold all the cards. I closed the laptop lid with a soft click, a calculating smile touching my lips for the first time all evening. The heartbreak was still there, but beneath it, a powerful new strategy was taking shape. They wanted a fight, and very soon they would get one they could never possibly win. The next evening, I walked into the dining room to find an unwelcome surprise waiting for me. Martha and her spoiled daughter, Chloe, were already seated at the table, chattering loudly as if they owned the place. David hurried out of the kitchen carrying a bottle of wine, looking slightly guilty when he saw me standing in the doorway. You invited them over without telling me? I asked, keeping my voice dangerously low as I crossed my arms. Come on, Ethan, do not make a big deal out of it. David sighed, avoiding my gaze. Mother and Chloe want to come over for dinner to talk things through. We wanted to see if you had finally grown up and signed those papers. Chloe chimed in, tossing her long hair over her shoulder with a mocking smirk. Honestly, Ethan, this house is far too grand for someone with your tiny background anyway. Sit down, Ethan, Martha commanded, waving her hand dismissively, and stop glaring at my daughter. I forced my jaw to relax and pulled out a chair, taking my seat at the end of the table. Did you even cook this meat properly, Ethan? Martha asked loudly, poking at the roast on her plate with a look of utter disgust. It tastes completely dry. Honestly, David, I do not know how you stomach his cooking every single day. He has no domestic skills whatsoever. Well, what can you expect from someone who grew up in a cramped little apartment across town? Chloe laughed shrilly, taking a sip of wine. He probably thinks instant noodles are gourmet cuisine. David actually chuckled, shaking his head and looking at his sister. You know how it is, Chloe. He is trying his best, even if his best is not quite up to our family standards. The words hit me like a physical blow, coming straight from the man who was supposed to protect me. Is that funny to you, David? I asked, my voice trembling slightly as I looked across the table at him. "Stop being so overly sensitive, Ethan," David snapped, his smile fading into annoyance. "You cannot take a simple joke. It is not a joke when your family spends every second insulting me in the very home I pay for," I replied, my anger flaring hot beneath my skin. "Your home?" Martha shrieked, slamming her fork down so hard the silverware rattled. "Listen to yourself, you ungrateful parasite. You live under my sunroof, eat his food, and wear clothes he bought you with his hard-earned executive salary." I had heard enough. I pushed my chair back with a sharp scrape, unable to sit there another second watching my husband mock me alongside them. "Excuse me," I said tightly, turning away from the table. "Do not walk away while I am talking to you." Martha barked at my back. I hurried down the hall and straight into the kitchen, slamming the swinging door shut behind me. Leaning heavily against the cool marble counter, I clutched the edges so hard my knuckles turned completely white, fighting the hot tears stinging my eyes. My phone buzzed loudly in my pocket, vibrating against my leg. I pulled it out and saw Richard's name flashing on the screen. I swiped to answer, pressing the phone to my ear. "Hey, man," Richard's voice came through clearly, laced with concern. "You sound terrible. Are they over at your place again?" "They are in the dining room right now, mocking me, and David is laughing right along with them," I whispered, my voice breaking slightly as the frustration boiled over. "I feel like I am losing my mind. Richard, listen to me." "Ethan," Richard said firmly, his tone cutting through my panic like steel. "Do not let those arrogant snobs break you. Remember who owns that house. Remember who funded every single brick of it. You hold all the cards, man. They're just barking dogs playing in your backyard." A slow, steady breath slipped past my lips as his words sank deep into my mind. He was completely right. I was acting like a victim in a house that belonged entirely to me. "You are right, Richard," I murmured, a cold sense of clarity washing away my tears. "I am done playing the victim. That is my boy." Richard chuckled softly on the other end. "Go back out there and play your game. Let them dig their own graves." I ended the call, slipping the phone back into my pocket. I took a long, deep breath, staring at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. I wiped the stray tears from my cheeks, stretched my lips into a cool, calm smile, and turned back toward the dining room doors. They wanted to treat me like a helpless servant in my own house? Fine. It was time to start playing a very dangerous psychological game. A week later, the doorbell rang sharply, interrupting my morning coffee. I opened the heavy front door to find Martha standing there with a triumphant grin, accompanied by a tall, slick-haired man in a tailored charcoal suit carrying a leather briefcase. "Mr. Vance, my family attorney," Martha introduced him smoothly, pushing past me into the foyer as if she owned the place. "We have some important business to take care of today, Ethan." I stepped aside, keeping my expression entirely neutral as the lawyer walked straight into the dining room. David trailed behind them, keeping his eyes glued to the floor and looking thoroughly miserable. Mr. Vance unzipped his leather briefcase with a crisp zipper sound, pulling out a thick stack of legal documents and slamming them onto the mahogany dining table. "Let us get straight to the point," Mr. Vance said, flashing a cold, professional smile that did not reach his eyes. "We are here to secure the household assets for long-term family preservation." "What kind of assets are we talking about, Mr. Vance?" I asked, walking slowly into the room and pulling out a chair across from them. "Your shared household assets, of course," the lawyer replied smoothly, tapping a finger on the papers. "Since everything my client's son brings into this marriage is part of the family estate, Mrs. has requested a simple transfer of half these accumulated holdings into the secure Martha Family Trust." David cleared his throat nervously, stepping up behind his mother and offered me a pleading look. "Ethan, just listen to them," he whispered, his voice shaking slightly. "It is really just a formality to prove your loyalty to my family." "Loyalty?" I repeated, letting out a quiet, humorless chuckle. "You want me to transfer half of our supposed household wealth into a trust controlled entirely by your mother? Do not play games with us." "Ethan," Martha barked, slamming her hand flat on the table. "You contribute nothing, yet you live like a king on my son's salary. This is your chance to prove you are not just a scheming gold digger. I looked the slick lawyer dead in the eye, feeling an eerie, absolute calm wash entirely over my mind. Every frantic heartbeat from earlier vanished, replaced by cold clarity. And what if I refused to sign right this second, Mr. Vance? I asked quietly. The attorney adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses, his smile turning razor-sharp. Refusal to cooperate in protecting family assets carries severe legal and domestic consequences, Mr. Vance warned smoothly. My client has immense power in these matters. I need time to think about this contract, I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms over my chest. I will not sign anything on the spot today. Time to think? Martha shrieked, her face turning bright crimson with sudden rage. You do not get time to think. You sign this document right now, or there will be severe consequences. Consequences like what, Martha? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Do not test me, you ungrateful parasite, Martha yelled, slamming her fist down again. If you do not comply and sign these papers by the end of this week, I will personally cut David out of the family fortune forever. I will make sure he disowns you, and I will force both of you out onto the streets with absolutely nothing to your names. David winced visibly at his mother threat, shrinking back against the wall like a frightened child. He looked at me with pure panic, whispering, Please, Ethan, just sign it. You heard my mother. We will lose everything if you do not. I stood up slowly from the chair, looking down at the stack of fraudulent papers resting on the table before glancing up at Martha's arrogant sneer. By the end of the week, you say? I asked softly. Yes, Martha snarled, pointing a shaking finger right at my face. 7 days, Ethan. Sign the papers, or your life as you know it is completely over. I smiled calmly, sliding the document slightly back toward their side of the table. Very well, Martha. You shall have your answer in 7 days. With only days remaining before Martha's absolute deadline, I spent every waking hour digging through financial statements, bank archives, and legal records to uncover the full extent of David and his mother's deceptive trap. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, and I answered it immediately, hearing Richard's urgent voice come through the line. You need to hear this. Ethan, Richard said, without wasting any time. I managed to track down some whispers in the business circles. David is in massive trouble. He has accumulated huge gambling and secret business debts behind your back. Debts? I asked, my grip tightening hard around the phone. How bad is it? It is devastatingly bad, Richard warned gravely. He is drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses. And worse, Martha plans to use your house as collateral to bail him out of this mess without your knowledge or consent. My stomach churned with cold fury as the entire puzzle pieces snapped into place. They were not just trying to bully me. They were plotting to steal my home to pay off David's reckless gambling addiction. Thanks for digging this up, Richard, I said quietly. I will handle it from here. Be careful, man, Richard replied before hanging up. They are playing dirty. Later that night, I walked upstairs into our bedroom, finding David pacing nervously near the closet with his head in his hands. I closed the bedroom door behind me with a sharp click that made him jump. We need to talk, David, I said, my voice cutting through the tense air like a knife. What is it now, Ethan? David asked offensively, refusing to meet my eyes. I am stressed enough as it is. Are you stressed about your massive gambling debts, David? I asked flatly, crossing my arms. David color completely drained from his face, his eyes widening in sheer panic. What are you talking about? Who told you that? So it is true, I replied, stepping closer to him. You ran up a mountain of secret debts, and your mother plan is to use my house as collateral to bail you out behind my back. David's knees buckled slightly under the pressure. He sank down onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands as loud. Ragged sobs ripped out his throat. I am sorry, Ethan. David wept openly, his shoulders shaking as he looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. I did not mean for it to get this bad. The underground poker games destroyed me. And your mother? I asked, my voice remaining ice cold. She offered to clear your debts? Yes, David cried out, wiping his face frantically. Mother said she would pay off every single cent I owe, but only under one condition. She said I had to force you to sign over property deed and kick you out of the house. The final, fragile thread of love, holding my heart together, snapped completely in two. "So you never loved me at all, did you, David?" I whispered, the harsh reality finally sinking deep into my bones. David sniffed loudly, stammering through his tears. "That is not true, Ethan. I do love you, but—" "Stop talking," I'd interrupted, holding up my hand to silence him. "You never saw me as a husband. You only saw me as a convenient financial safety net to bail out your family catastrophic mistakes." "Ethan, please, do not leave me like this," David begged, crawling across the mattress toward me and grabbing the hem of my shirt. "Help me fix this." "It is already fixed, David," I said, looking down at him with absolute indifference. "Your mother wanted a war, and she is about to get a front row seat to her own destruction." I pulled my shirt away from his trembling grip and turned around, walking out of the bedroom and leaving him sobbing alone in the dark. The day of the final deadline arrived with a heavy, overcast sky. The doorbell rang sharply at noon. I opened the door to find Martha, David, and Mr. Vance standing on the porch, marching into my living room expecting an easy, total victory. Martha wore a triumphant smirk plastered across her face, holding a sleek gold pen out toward me like a royal scepter. "Time is up, Ethan," Martha announced loudly, her voice dripping with absolute arrogance as she swept past me into the center of the room. David stood silently behind her, looking utterly miserable and hollow, his eyes sunken and lifeless, completely broken by his own profound greed and cowardice. "Please, make yourselves comfortable," I said smoothly, stepping aside to gesture toward the seating area. Martha raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my calm demeanor. "You are taking this defeat remarkably well, Ethan. Let us celebrate the end of this nonsense," I replied softly. I walked over to the mahogany bar cart, picked up a crystal decanter, and poured 3 glasses of expensive vintage wine, carrying them over to the table. I even poured you expensive wine, playing the role of the completely submissive, defeated spouse who had finally accepted his fate. Mr. Vance accepted his glass with a cold, professional nod, setting his leather briefcase flat on the table and unzipping it with a crisp sound. "Let us not waste any more time," Mr. Vance said, sliding the final transfer contract across the polished mahogany table right in front of me. "Just sign on the designated line, Ethan, and this unpleasantness will be over." I looked down at the dense legal text, feeling a strange sense of absolute power surging quietly through my veins. I picked up the heavy gold pen Martha had brought, spinning it slowly between my fingers while keeping my eyes fixed on her smug face. "I have just one question for you before I put pen to paper. Martha," I said quietly, "what could you possibly want to ask now?" Martha sneered, crossing her arms tightly. "Are you absolutely certain you want to sign away your son's future?" I asked, letting the words hang heavily in the silent room. Martha threw her head back and laughed right in my face, a harsh, grating sound of pure amusement. "My son's future? Are you completely delusional, Ethan?" Martha cackled, pointing a shaking finger at the contract. "You are signing away your own poverty. Now stop stalling and sign the papers immediately." David winced, staring down at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze as his mother continued to mock me. "You think I am signing away my own life, Martha?" I asked, smiling softly. "Sign it now, you ungrateful wretch." Martha shrieked, slamming her hand onto the table so hard the wine glasses rattled. "You have nowhere else to go." I calmly set the pen down on the table, refusing to touch her fraudulent contract. "You really believe this house and these assets belong to David family, do you?" I asked, leaning back against the couch cushions. "Everyone with a brain knows my son is the executive supporting this household," Martha scoffed, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling in sheer annoyance. Mr. Vance frowned slightly, sensing a sudden shift in the atmosphere. He adjusted his glasses and looked closely at me. "Mr. Vance, is there a problem with the legal terms?" "There is a massive problem, Mr. Vance," I replied calmly. Before the lawyer could respond, another sharp knock echoed loudly from the front door. "Expecting guests, Ethan?" Martha snapped, her expression turning sour. I did not wait for her permission. I stood up smoothly and walked over to the entryway, pulling the heavy front door wide open. A tall, quiet professional stood on the porch holding a thick clipboard and a sealed manila envelope. "Are you Ethan Vance?" The man asked in a low, professional tone. "I am," I replied, stepping back to let him inside. Martha turned around, narrowing her eyes as the stranger walked right into her field of vision. "Who on earth are you, and what are you doing in my son's house?" "My name is Marcus," the quiet professional stated evenly, ignoring her hostility entirely as he stepped up to the edge of the living room. "I am a court-appointed process server." "Process server?" Martha repeated, her triumphant smirk instantly faltering as a flicker of unease crossed her face. "What kind of nonsense is this?" Marcus turned his gaze directly toward Martha and Mr. Vance, opening his clipboard to reveal the official court seals. "I am here to deliver the ultimate legal surprise," Marcus announced clearly, holding out the documents for the stunned lawyer to take. Instead of picking up their pen to sign away my life, I reached beneath the coffee table and pulled out a thick manila folder of my own. I slid the heavy folder across the polished mahogany table, right over their fraudulent contract. "What is this game, Ethan?" Martha demanded, her voice rising in sudden panic as she stared at the plain brown paper. "Let me explain it to you, Mr. Vance," I said, leaning back and looking straight at the slick attorney. "As the sole legal owner of this house, purchased 3 full years before I even met David, I am officially serving all of you with eviction and restraining notices for criminal trespassing and attempted fraud." Martha's face instantly lost all its color, her triumphant smile shattering into a mask of pure terror. "Eviction? What are you talking about, you lying parasite?" Martha shrieked, snatching the papers out of the folder with shaking hands. "This is David home. My son worked for everything here." Mr. Vance did not wait for her to finish. He grabbed the official property deed from her trembling fingers, his eyes darting frantically across the legal text. The lawyer's face went completely white, his breath catching in his throat. "Oh, my God," Mr. Vance whispered, his hands trembling so hard he nearly dropped the papers. "What does it say, Vance?" Martha barked, grabbing his arm frantically. "Tell him this is a fake. Tell my son owns this house." "It is not a fake," Mr. Vance choked out, staring at me in absolute horror. "The deed is registered solely in Ethan's name. It was executed 3 years before your son's marriage. We just tried to execute an illegal seizure of private property." "Illegal seizure?" Martha screamed, spinning around to face her son. "David, what is he talking about? Tell me this is a lie. Tell me you own this house." David could not look at her. All the color drained from his face, leaving him looking hollow and ghost-like. "I cannot, Mother," David whispered, his voice cracking into a pathetic whimper. "I never owned any of this. Ethan bought everything before we even met." "You absolute fool," Martha shrieked, raising her hand and striking David across the face with a loud, ringing slap. "You lied to me. You told me we owned this estate." David did not even try to defend himself against his mother blow. Instead, he let out a choked sob and dropped heavily to his knees on the marble floor. He crawled across the rug toward me, frantically grabbing onto the legs of my trousers and burying his face against my shoes. "Ethan, please." David wept openly, his shoulders shaking with ragged, desperate sobs. "Forgive me. Please do not throw me out. Mother forced me into the whole scheme. She said she would cut me off if I did not help her take your house." I looked down at the man who had sworn to love and protect me, feeling nothing inside my chest except absolute emptiness. "She forced you, David?" I asked, my voice chillingly calm as I stared at him. "Yes," David cried, kissing the hem of my pants like a beggar on the street. "I was weak. I was drowning in my gambling debts, and she promised to save me if I obeyed her. But I love you, Ethan. I swear I love you. Please give me another chance." I slowly pulled my legs away from his desperate grip, stepping back and looking down at him with total, chilling indifference. "You never loved me, David," I said quietly, the words cutting through the room like razor blades. "You only loved the safety net I provided, and the moment things got hard, you tried to throw me to the wolves. Get up off the floor, you pathetic coward." Martha screamed, her voice cracking with fury and humiliation as she tried to pull her son up. "Do not humiliate our family any further in front of this nobody. We are completely ruined, Mother," David sobbed, collapsing back onto the floor and cover his face with his hands. She owns everything. We have nowhere to go. Mr. Vance hastily packed his briefcase, avoiding my eyes entirely. I am leaving, the lawyer muttered nervously, backing toward the front door. This is completely outside my legal scope. Do not contact me again. Wait, Mr. Vance. You cannot leave me here with this monster, Martha cried out, rushing after him. But the lawyer slammed the front door shut behind him, abandoning them both to their fate. Silence descended heavily over the living room, broken only by David's wretched cry on the floor and Martha's ragged, furious breathing as she realized her entire empire of lies had collapsed around her. I stood in the center of my own living room, looking around at the high ceilings and the marble floors I had built entirely with my own hands. For the first time in years, the crushing weight vanished from my shoulders. A deep, profound sense of absolute freedom washed over my mind and soul. I was finally completely free. Within 48 hours, the full truth of the attempted fraud exploded across our high society circles like a bomb. My phone buzzed constantly with text messages and calls from mutual acquaintances, but I ignored them all, letting the shockwaves finish off Martha and Chloe Pride. Stripped of their wealthy bluff and exposed as predatory schemers, Martha and Chloe faced total public humiliation wherever they went. Even at the country club, people whispered behind their backs, refusing to look them in the eye. At the same time, David creditors caught wind of the failed property scheme and realized he had zero claim to my house or wealth. They came after him with absolute aggression, freezing his accounts and cornering him at every turn. Left with no other options, David was forced to declare formal bankruptcy and pack his bags in utter disgrace. He called me one afternoon, his voice broken and hollow. "Ethan, please, I have nowhere left to go," David sobbed to the phone receiver. "The creditors took my car, and my mother had to take me in." "You made your bed, David," I replied coldly. "Now live in it." I hung up the phone before he could say another word, blocking his number permanently. True to his word, David had to move back into his mother-cramped, outdated apartment across town, living in the exact kind of poverty they had always looked down upon. On a bright Saturday afternoon, a large rental truck pulled up right into my driveway. I stood quietly on my front porch, watching a pair of burly moving crew workers haul away David's few remaining cardboard boxes and cheap suitcases. Watch the corners of that dresser. "Boss," one of the moving crew workers called out to his partner as they carried the last pieces of junk toward the truck. "Just get out of here quickly," I instructed the crew with a calm wave of my hand. A few curious neighbors walked past the sidewalk, whispering and glancing over at the open doors, witnessing the final public downfall of the arrogant family. "Are you all set here, sir?" the lead moving crew worker asked, walking back up the porch steps to hand me the final clipboard. "Completely set, thank you," I replied, signing my name swiftly and handing the board back. The workers loaded into the front cab of the truck, the heavy engine roaring to life before pulling away down the suburban street, disappearing around the corner. I stood alone on the porch, closing my eyes and taking a long, deep breath of the fresh, crisp evening air. As the breeze washed over my face, I felt the last lingering weight of the toxic marriage lift completely from my shoulders. I looked out across the manicured lawn of the estate I had built entirely with my own sweat and ambition. I am richer, stronger, and infinitely wiser than I was when I first met them. No one would ever look down on me again, or make me feel small in my own home. I turned around, stepping back to the front door and locking it securely behind me, ready to step boldly into a brand new chapter of my life.